Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, March 10, 2021, and the motion adopted by committee on April 15, 2021, the committee is resuming its study of Bill C-205, an act to amend the Health Animal Act. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25, 2021, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted.
To guarantee the proper meeting, there are some rules. First of all, I will call you by name and open your mic, click on it to take it off mute. It will be for any other purpose. There will be a control by the technicians in the room. I must remind you that all interventions must be directed to the chair, but I ask you to mute your mics when you do not have the floor.
As an individual, we have J. Scott Weiss, Professor, University of Guelph. Welcome, Mr. Weiss. And from the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, Dr. Henry Seelan, I don't know if I pronounced this right, veterinarian. Welcome, Mr. Seelan. And Dr. Brian Evans, Veterinary Deputy Director, World Organization for Animal Health, retired, but is Chief Veterinary Officer of Canada, also retired, but we value your experience. And from the Chicken Farmers of Canada, Nick DeGraff, First Vice Chair. Welcome, Mr. DeGraff. And Lisa Bishop Spencer, Director of Brand and Communications. So we'll start with the opening statements, and everyone will have a 5-minute statement. So we'll start with Mr. Weiss with your 5-minute statement. Go ahead, Mr. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I'll just give my background and be happy to answer questions, which I assume will be directed at the biosecurity, infection control standpoints. So by way of background, I'm a veterinary internal medicine specialist who focuses solely on infectious diseases. I'm a professor at the Ontario Veterinary College at the University of Guelph. I direct the University of Guelph Centre for Public Health and Zoonoses, and I'm Chief of Infection Control at the Ontario Veterinary College Health Sciences Centre, our teaching hospital. My work is nationally and internationally with various groups on infectious diseases, infection control, biosecurity, aiming to optimize animal health and human health by way of optimizing animal health. I've participated in numerous biosecurity and guideline development ventures. And overall, my work involves a range of infectious disease topics, but focuses on matters that would relate to this bill potentially in terms of emerging disease, antimicrobial resistance, diseases at the human-animal interface, as well as broader topics of infection control and biosecurity. So with that, I'll be brief. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on this area pertaining to this bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Weiss. And we'll go to the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association for 5 minutes. Whoever wants to take the floor, it's yours now for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good day to all the members of the committee. My name is Dr. Brian Evans, as the chair has indicated. I am the current treasurer of the Canadian Vet Medical Association. As such, I also serve as an ex officio member of the CVMA Executive and the CVMA Council. It was my honor and privilege to previously serve as Canada's Chief Veterinary Officer for 15 years, as well as Canada's Chief Food Safety Officer and as the Executive Vice President of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, prior to my retirement from the public service in 2013. I was subsequently very fortunate to serve for a number of years as the Deputy Director General at the World Organization for Animal Health, known globally as the OIE, based in Paris. I'm pleased to be accompanied today at committee by Dr. Henry Seelan, the chair of the CVMA's National Issues Committee, and a highly respected food animal practitioner from Eastern Ontario. It's our pleasure to lend our collective experience and perspectives to assist you in your consideration of Private Members Bills C-205, an act to amend the Health of Animals Act. Briefly, the CVMA was incorporated by an act of Parliament in 1948 Our association is the national and international voice for Canada's approximately 13,000 veterinarians and 9,000 veterinary technicians and technologists. And we provide leadership and advocacy for the veterinary medical community. The strategic priorities underpinning the work of the CVMA include leadership on national and international veterinary issues, animal welfare advocacy, and support for members in building successful careers and maintaining balanced lives. Canada's veterinarians make critical contributions to support of the well-being of Canadians and the Canadian economy in a wide variety of roles. This includes the health and welfare of aquatic, terrestrial farm and companion animals, food security and food safety inspection, and policy development in animal health and public health domains in federal, provincial, and territorial governments, scientific research, laboratory diagnostics, technical support for the animal health industry, and many others. Canadian veterinarians embody the real-world application of the principles of One Health. That is, we work to address risks that emerge at the interface of animal health, human health, and ecosystem health. We are qualified to assess and advise on the prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and response to animal and zoonotic diseases, those diseases that affect both animals and humans, including those of livestock that have the potential to spread rapidly and widely, affecting herds and flocks over vast areas, often with significant adverse welfare, social, and economic impacts. Likewise, we understand the role of the environment as a potential source of disease and exposure to contaminants of many sorts, and the ability of hazards to spread through environmental contamination from affected premises to others in the surrounding area and beyond. Overlying our roles and responsibilities in One Health is the essential role veterinarians play in contributing to the Canadian economy through trade and market access, by working with producers and in close collaboration with the CFIA and provincial governments to produce healthy animals and safe food, which respect societal values and meet consumer expectations. In the area of animal welfare, Canadian veterinarians work through the CVMA with the National Farm Animal Care Council to develop and maintain codes of practice for all farm animal species that are the basis for animal care programs managed by industry. In the area of animal and public health, Canada's veterinarians are trusted advisors in designing and implementing strict on-farm voluntary biosecurity protocols focused on managing natural, incidental, and deliberate threats, specifically aimed at prevention of disease and illness in animals. Veterinarians are well aware that prevention of an animal or zoonotic disease outbreak is much more cost-effective than managing the consequences. This proposed amendment to the Health of Animals Act would make it an offense to enter, without lawful authority or excuse, a place in which animals are kept, if doing so could result in the exposure of the animals to a disease or toxic substance that is capable of affecting or contaminating them. The CVMA acknowledges that authorized or unauthorized entry of individuals onto premises where animals are raised or housed is one way that diseases or other contaminants could be introduced onto the premises. It is for this very reason that many livestock operations have strict entry and exit controls, in many cases including decontamination, shower in and shower out protocols. Biosecurity procedures incorporate controls to mitigate risk from other potential disease entry points as well. For example, through strategies to ensure herds are closed to introduction of live animals, vaccination programs are in effect, wildlife and insect vector populations are controlled.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, if you can conclude, because we have...
Certainly.
Yeah, okay.
Certainly. So today, Dr. Seelan and I would be pleased to speak to our local, national, and international expertise in animal health, especially as it pertains to the mandate and activities of the CVMA and the role of Canadian veterinarians in on-farm biosecurity. We trust the testimony can help inform your study of this proposed legislation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evans. And now we'll go to the Chicken Farmers of Canada for 5 minutes. Whoever wants to take the floor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name, as previously mentioned, is Nick DeGraff. I'm a third-generation chicken farmer in the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia. I'm also first vice chair of Chicken Farmers of Canada, and I'm joined here today with CFC's Director of Brand and Communications, Lisa Bishop Spencer. For several years now, farmers like me across the country have feared the possibility of activists trespassing on our properties and into our chicken barns with the intention of what they think is saving the animals and protesting our commitment to carefully raising safe chicken. Therefore, we appreciate that the aims of Bill C-205 are twofold for our sector. It aims to protect the farmers and the animals in our care from activist threats while maintaining disease prevention and biosecurity on the farm. Ensuring the appropriate care and welfare of the birds raised by Canadian chicken farmers is a top priority for our sector. We take pride in our long-standing, progressive, and innovative approach to animal care, as demonstrated by our third-party audited and mandatory Raised by a Canadian Farmer animal care program that safeguards our flocks. The animal care program for Canadian chicken has a solid, credible, and science-based foundation. CFC's animal care program is third-party audited and mandatory on every farm. The program uses enforcement mechanisms in cases of non-compliance, and we are pleased to say that 100% of farmers are compliant. Chicken Farmers of Canada also has an FPT recognized Raised by a Canadian Farmer on-farm food safety program, which guarantees that the highest standards of biosecurity and disease prevention are in place on the farm. 100% of our farmers coast to coast are certified and compliant. Our on-farm food safety program employs strict measures on the farm to prevent flock infections from outside sources, including top-notch requirements for biosecurity, disease prevention, feed and water management and testing, and mandatory record keeping. Simple acts like registering visitors to the farm, wearing designated or new coveralls and booties inside the barn, and careful flock reports are some of the many steps guaranteeing safe chicken for Canadians. These programs, coupled with the trust Canadians have in farmers, are some of the many reasons why chicken is Canada's #1 meat protein. The difference between the two programs is their assurance programs. OFSAP has an FPT recognition protocol, whereas the animal care program does not. We are calling for the development of an FPT recognition protocol for animal care programs in the next agricultural policy framework that would help government convey the proper message to consumers about how their food is being raised and strengthen consumer trust in farmer messages over activist rhetoric. I am proud to follow these programs carefully in order to raise food for Canadian families. You also have to remember that farming is my business, and I operate it no differently than any other type of business does. I have procedures and protocols in place, I mitigate and manage risk, and I work hard to provide a high-quality product for Canadians. As part of my business practices, I have good security policies and procedures in place to ensure overall security against any threat or multiple risks. An invasion rattles a farmer's sense of security and privacy and creates deep concern about biosecurity and what seems like an ongoing attack on our livelihoods. It is likely that outsiders entering a farm or private property that raises animals does not know about the biosecurity requirements on Canadian chicken farms, and in the case of activists, does not respect them. Biosecurity is critical to the prevention of disease in flocks. On my farm, I track visitors and know who is on the property to mitigate the risks of introducing a domestic, reportable, or emerging disease on the farm. Should a trespasser expose the animals to an unknown substance or disease, or to an element that may compromise food safety, this may impact my ability to market that entire flock. I know this legislation might bring up questions about people's right to protest or laws that are already in place to persecute trespassers. But when you are considering this bill, I want you to think about me and the thousands of other poultry and livestock farmers across the country who work hard every single day to ensure the food we are raising for Canadians is safe and raised with care. Thank you for your time and consideration of Bill C-205. We hope you will support this important defense of farmers and the on-farm practices that protect our food system so we can keep feeding Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. de Graaf. And with that, we'll go to our first panel, first round, 6 minutes questions, and we'll start with Warren Steinley. Go ahead, Mr. Steinley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today on what we believe is a very important bill, Bill 205, moving forward. Mr. DeGraff, you mentioned the fact that you guys have Raised by a Canadian Farmer Animal Care Program already implemented. One question I have is, we know it's credible and science-based, but is it static or is it ever changing and evolving as your industry evolves? Could you answer that for me?
Yeah, I sure could. The program is reviewed on a regular basis. We do make changes. It's quite an involved process, but no, it is absolutely not static.
So would that then make sense that we always review and maybe make changes to the Health of Animals Act and maybe bring in some new regulations to ensure that there are more on-farm safety procedures? Would that make sense then for a review of the Animal Health Act and maybe adding some regulations to that? Mr. DeGraff?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense to have a review of this. I mean, it's the same thing that we do. Yeah.
Yeah. So we know, and I know your producers and people within your industry group have had some instances of activism on their farms. Have they seen an increase in, I wouldn't say aggressiveness of some of the activism that has happened on farms? And is that maybe one of the reasons why this bill could be so important, because there needs to be some more regulations put in place so people realize there are consequences to their actions when they go on farm and put animals' health in jeopardy?
I'll let Lisa answer that one, if you don't mind.
No trouble at all. We have seen an increase in activist activity on the farm, as you noted earlier. This is very disruptive, not only for the farmer's way of doing business, but also for mental health and other considerations. I think it's important to remember that, farmers have a right to be able to run their business in peace, but more importantly, the animals in their care are the ones that we need to ensure stay that way, stay healthy, and stay well. This is something that would be put at risk every time that there's an invasion or a takeover of a farm, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent that as much as possible.
And a couple of witnesses and Mr. DeGraff had mentioned that, maybe sometimes activists aren't aware of some of the issues they might bring with them on the farm. Do you think maybe a change to this act and implementing Bill C-205 might also help educate some of the activists on really some of the dangers they do bring forward?
Would Bobby ever see it?
Mr. Chair, you're not on mute. Oh.
Sorry about
that. That's okay. Sorry about that. I'll just restart. Some of the activists may be not aware of some of the harms that they could be perpetrating on the animals when they're coming into barns and the stress they're bringing. Do you think this Bill C-205 would actually help in educating some of the activism that's taking place on farms across the country?
Nick, did you want me to answer that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I think anything that helps people understand how important it is to maintain flock health, in our case, animal health, is something that's going to be valuable. We need to ensure that people understand that, farms are not the farms that sort of old, and these are well-established operations with on-farm food safety protocols that need to be adhered to.
Thank you very much. And maybe I'll jump over to Mr. Evans. And with all your expertise, just a question is, we heard a very emotional story about a young farm that had just started, and they had activists come on their farm, and it actually led them to get out of farming because not only did it have some animal concerns, but also family concerns and some biosecurity concerns. Do you think a bill like this helps with maybe putting some of that mental stress off of the farmers, that there is something in place where they're not only ensuring their family is going to be safe, but also the animals from activists coming onto the farm? Or do you believe this is just something that is going to educate activists as well? Kind of the similar question that I asked to Mrs. Spencer.
Certainly, I thank you for the question. I think from my perspective, speaking on my collective experience, I think anything that can be done which allows for the application or the implementation of accepted standards that are both in written protocols, are implemented and can be auditable in terms of maintaining flock or herd health is to everyone's advantage. I think for most producers, obviously, I would say, and I'll let Henry speak to his experience at a private level. I think all producers in this country are, as has been mentioned by the industry, are in the business of producing safe food in line with societal values and in line with consumer expectations. But Henry deals with this on a daily basis, particularly with dairy and other herds in Eastern Ontario. So with the permission of the chair, perhaps Henry could add his perspective.
Yes, Henry, please do so. I grew up on a dairy farm, so I'd love to have your perspective here for the last 25 seconds.
Yeah. So again, I'm primarily a dairy veterinarian, and I think, or I'd like to make everybody aware that there are formal biosecurity protocols that are happening in all dairy farms. They're mandatory, and veterinarians are tasked with auditing, doing a biosecurity audit, and tailor a biosecurity program, and to make recommendations that are very specific to that each individual farm. So it's not a cookie cutter protocol at all. It's a very farm specific one, and I think the veterinary profession is well situated to make that, to do that, provide those protocols and provide input for our clients.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. And Mr. Sani, I apologize for my mic on. I did add a few seconds to make up for it. And before we move on to the next one, I'd just like to welcome Mr. Morrissey to our committee, and also the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Barlow. Welcome back to the committee. And with that, we'll go to Mr. Lewis for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our panelists for being here in this important discussion. I appreciate your time. I would like to start my questions to Dr. Weiss. Being down the road here in Kitchener-Conestoga and having a child at University of Guelph, it just only seemed fitting. We're here today, and primarily, we're talking about animal health and safety, and we're talking about farmers' health and safety. And biosecurity issues are obviously prevalent, and obviously you're an expert on those. So can you explain to us the major root causes of biosecurity issues? Maybe list them in the order of prevalence that your experience has noted. What types of biosecurity issues are being faced?
Well, are you asking with respect to people coming on the farm, or
no? Just in general. Just in general. I mean, the Dr. Evans touched on it, and I might ask him as well on maybe herds being closed or wildlife vectors or other things like that. Just in general. Biosecurity.
Well, and I guess I'm even not sure exactly what you're asking, but I think one of the things we're concerned about in the biosecurity aspect is preventing movement of things onto a facility that aren't there, or letting them spread within a facility. And for a pathogen or infectious agent to get onto a facility, it's going to come in through various routes. That could be people that are coming in, that could be farmers, veterinarians, visitors, people bringing in feed. It could be other animals that are brought into the facility, to the farm. It could be wild birds. It could be things that come in through air, which is very unlikely, but in close proximity. It could be things that get in through water, through runoff and pastures. There are various ways that things can get in. The relative risk of those will vary greatly with the type of animal, the type of farm, and the pathogen that we're talking about. But something has to get onto the farm that's new, typically, for us to be worried about a biosecurity concern.
Okay, thank you. I imagine the term there, you just kind of summed it up, the relative risks, and it depends on many factors. Okay. What recommendations can we have as a committee to help our agricultural workers to make those protocols that they're experiencing easier? What kind of resources can we offer? Would it be enhanced funding, education, communication? How can we help recommend to help mitigate those relative risks?
Well, for biosecurity in general, the industry has done a very good job. There are very good national standards for all our industries. There's a varying implementation of biosecurity by the different sectors. How they run chickens, for example, is very different than beef cattle and dairy cattle and pigs. And they all have different risks and different ways they approach them. But the different industries have quite good standards developed. The industries themselves, collaboration with CFIA to come up with national standards, veterinarians to come in and assist with development of biosecurity programs, preventive medicine programs, and the like. So I think you would have to ask the industries themselves what they would like for support. But I think we are in an era now where there is quite good information, quite good support of what to do. And the implementation can be a challenge depending on the industry. But overall, we're in a much better position than we were 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll turn my questions to Dr. Evans. With your experience, we're talking about biosecurity and stopping diseases, and here we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So again, trying to keep animal health and farmers' health, physical and mental health, both covered. Are we learning, or would you say we're learning lessons from the global pandemic, the COVID pandemic we're experiencing now, and there are things that we can take, applications and lessons that we can take moving forward to protect our farmers, to protect the animals?
Thank you for the question. I think it offers a number of insights. Certainly, as Scott has touched on, the reality of disease emergence is constantly changing, and it's emerging on an ongoing basis. We see up to 5 new diseases emerge every year. 60% of those have an animal base or an animal origin to them that affect human health as well. So, we are recognizing that lessons do get, I would like to say lessons get learned, but I would be remiss if I said that with sincerity, because I think often there are lessons noted, but we live in a reality where history tends to repeat itself all too often. Canada itself is not immune to having had situations with the introduction of diseases onto farms, obviously, like all nations. Two of the more memorable ones that the committee might recall as well. Foot and mouth in Saskatchewan, 1952, obviously predates the vast majority of the committee members, I'd suggest, but nevertheless, from a Canadian agricultural experience, the reality being of foot and mouth in Saskatchewan, which ultimately was concluded to have been related to a farm worker who moved from West Germany to Saskatchewan in 1951. And the area that he resided in and worked with livestock in West Germany was suffering from an outbreak of foot and mouth type A, which was the same type of foot and mouth that emerged on farms in Saskatchewan over the subsequent time period. It's postulated it may have been the result of boots and clothing that he brought with him that were not cleaned and disinfected. Obviously, those issues of disinfection and cleaning weren't as prevalent in industry at that time as they are today. So again, an incident where a farm worker actually has been determined to have introduced the disease. More recently, 2009, when we dealt with, in Canada and globally, the outbreak of 2009 H1N1, unfortunately picked up the misnomer of swine flu, totally inappropriate given it was a triple assortment virus. But again, a situation where Canada was one of 22 countries around the world where infection with H1N1 was finally detected or confirmed in swine populations. In the vast majority of those circumstances, it was determined that these were pigs that were infected by people.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Dr. Evans. Thank you. We'll have to move on to the next questioner. And Monsieur Perron, allez-y pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes, Mr. Perron. Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here this afternoon. We very much appreciate it. Mr. Evans, I'll start with you. Given your broad expertise, you talk about biosecurity, but in the case of trespassing, where people just go onto a farm without doing any damage, just spend a few hours there on the farm and then leave, what is the consequence? What are the impacts of their trespass? Because it's not just the fact that they trespassed, but is there a contamination that ensues from their trespassing? Do you have statistics on this type of activity?
I regret. Thank you for merci pour la question, and thank you very much for the line of inquiry. I can't provide off the top of my head statistical analysis of where activist activity on farm has resulted without penetrating to the livestock holding or poultry holding area where issues have occurred. But as Dr. Weiss has indicated, the pathways by which animals can become infected are quite varied. So even if they do not access the barn or the housing structures themselves, contamination of water supply, contamination of grazing areas can also be a way by which animals can be exposed to both food safety issues in terms of toxic substances. But again, I think to be fair to your question, honorable member, I think it really comes down to intent. And these incursions can result in either accidental, incidental, or deliberate threat. Those are three distinct types of threat that can occur. And I think a lot of that has to be assessed within the lens of looking at what is the true intent of the intruder.
Merci.
Thank you. As a specialist of animal health, what would you say to people who tell us, don't pass this bill because this is going to make people call out false alarms? What do you think? What do you think? Will it do that?
Well, I would make, thank you again, honorable member. I would make 2 points. One, as has been referenced by a number of witnesses today and previously, I think part of the answer is in the issue of education information. Again, I think there are those with deliberate intent who, regardless of how well informed they are, will still make efforts to disrupt agricultural production on a values or a disconnect base with where agriculture is today. The other component of your question, I think, largely has to be answered in terms of beyond education, how would you enforce the provisions of this bill? And I think many witnesses have spoken to the challenges of enforcement. Dr. Seelan has spoken to the role that veterinarians play on farms in Canada. And I would have a concern that if the bill is envisioned as requiring more veterinary resources, whether they be federally with CFIA or provincially with provincial governments or from the private sector, we are already experiencing a significant shortage of veterinarians in Canada. And I would be concerned that in order to enhance CFIA resources, those resources are going to come at the direct expense of veterinarians who are currently in private practice or in other types of practice to move to CFIA, which then creates vulnerabilities, rob Peter to pay Paul scenario. So I think the issue isn't so much around the big area, it's around the enforcement construct.
Isn't there some way of simplifying the process, establishing, say, a partnership with the local police? Because there will be an offense that would be created and the police could be involved on the premises.
Well, very briefly, I would say that if we're talking about a situation where a disease or a situation evolves on the farm where it's been compromised because of an intrusion, the investigation of that type of disease outbreak is significantly different than the investigation of a natural disease outbreak. The forensic aspects of it, the issues around chain of custody and evidence leading to prosecution is an area where Scott could speak to, but I don't think it's part of the regular veterinary teaching curriculum. It is a different type of an investigation, and the use of individuals who are better trained in those types of enforcement and investigation would, from my perspective, be beneficial.
Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much. From the chicken producers, Mr. de Graaf, I'd like to hear you about the previous question. People tell us that say they suspect that there would be some mistreatment on a farm of the animals. What would be done? Do you fear that there would be this type of false alert?
Absolutely not. I mean, chicken farmers are stewards of the animals. I mean, we care about them. When they do well, we do well. I mean, that's really what it all comes down to. And there's nothing in this bill that I think would create a false alarm and hide any wrongdoings. Chicken farmers are trusted because we are good people and we know how to take care of our flock.
Thank you. Alors, merci, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Perron.
Mr. McGregor, I believe we lost you for a while, but good to see you back. Hopefully the sound is good and you have the floor for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I beg the committee's pardon because I've missed all of the opening statements and questions. So I'm kind of flying blind here on what's already been discussed. But so I beg your pardon on that. Maybe I'll start with the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. When you look at existing provisions of the Health of Animals Act, specifically under the prohibitions, I mean, sections 8, the concealment of the existence of a reportable disease, the keeping of diseased animals under clause 9, bringing diseased animals to market. These existing provisions of the federal statute broadly refer to anyone. It could be a person, it could be the farmer, it could be an employee. With Bill C-205, it's expressly making reference to a person, without lawful authority or excuse. I'm just wondering what you think of the language of Bill C-205 when you compare it to existing sections of the Parent Act, which it is seeking to amend. Do you have any comments on that?
Thank you for the question. Very, very briefly, I would state that it has to be borne in mind again that the Health of Animals Act and its relative enforcement relates to a subset of diseases. It talks about reportable diseases. And Canada benefits from a framework whereby between the federal government and the provincial governments, with agriculture being a shared jurisdiction, the provincial government also deals with a number of diseases which are not dealt with under the Health of Animals Act because they are not reportable federally. So it is that integration, I would say, that is very valuable in Canada because it gives a much broader coverage than this particular act does in isolation. The existing provisions of the Act, as you say, do take into account in other areas issues around contamination and toxic substances, but does not speak to how they are introduced. And it's back to a comment I made perhaps before your arrival, that when we look at the risk pathways that are involved and whether these risks, in fact, are low probability events with high consequences, the vast majority would fall into that category. And therefore, again, the question has to be asked, is adding this additional tranche, if you will, of risk mitigation going to be sufficient to mitigate the efforts of those who wish to advocate on the farm from introducing inadvertently, accidentally, or deliberately a situation to the farm that's going to be detrimental to animal health or animal welfare?
Professor Weiss, can I turn the same question to you, just comparing what C-205's language involves compared to the Parent Act? Because in the Parent Act, it's quite broad. It says no person shall, full stop. Whereas in this existing C-205, it says no person shall without lawful authority excuse. Do you have any comments on the difference in languages?
And sorry, I missed part. We have a fire alarm here, so I had to find a spot outside of the building where I could hear. So hopefully my audio is okay. When it comes to some of the specific language of the bill and how that would impact things, that's not really my area of expertise. I can comment on the biosecurity, the risk aspect, and how that would change the risk aspect. And from a risk aspect, it's not, if you change people's behaviors, you obviously change the risk. It comes down to, as Brian said, low risk, potentially high consequence. Overall, there are many good reasons that people shouldn't be trespassing on farms. Biosecurity is at the lower end of that risk for me. It varies quite a bit with the situation. Right now, the biggest issue would be COVID and mink. Trespasser on a mink farm would be a substantial concern about COVID. As Brian mentioned, influenza coming in would be a potential concern. Beyond that, there aren't many people walking around the street carrying a high consequence animal disease they're going to track in. And we'd be worried mainly about people going farm to farm. if there was a trespassing event that went from one farm to another farm. So you get into these scenarios where we can't do a cost benefit assessment very well because we just don't have the information. Sorry, I've gotten off topic from your question, I believe, but when it comes to the language of the bill, that gets outside of my realm.
Okay, well, thank you for contributing in any case. Maybe back to the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. Also, just within C205, when it's making reference to the entrance to a building or other enclosed place in which animals are kept, do you think there might be some confusion if say farm protesters made it onto a farm but did not come anywhere close to where animals are kept? It's just trying to find where a possibility of where federal jurisdiction might run into provincial jurisdiction. No one really knows where they're in charge.
I don't know. Henry, did you want to start on that one?
Brian, I have absolutely no expertise in that to answer that question.
Sure. Well, then I guess the point I would come back to again is the fact that as we have talked about, there are multiple pathways by which diseases can be introduced onto the farm, and it's not always through direct contact with the animals. I think when one talks about biosecurity and when we talk about other enclosures with animals, it could be abattoirs, those types of situations, the importance of biosecurity globally cannot be overstated. From an economic protection standpoint, we have moved the world miles down the road away from a country having to be free of a disease to a region or zone being free of a disease to what we call a compartment or compartmentalization. And what that means is that the biosecurity at the farm level must be linked to the biosecurity in transport, to biosecurity at the point of slaughter and through processing. And in doing that, what that does is it mitigates the significant economic impact that Canada and other countries have seen when diseases break out, because the linkage of those biosecurity elements allow the rest of the world to continue to trade with you at a much more restricted level.
Thank you, Dr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hopefully things are good, Mr. Weiss, and just glad this is June and not January. So thanks for sticking with us. And now we'll go to the second round. Mr. Epp for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses. And Dr. Evans, I'll come back to that point you were leading in a bit, but I want to start with the chicken farmers. Canada just received its negligible risk status for bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, from the OIA just recently, 20 years after an outbreak. And of course, we're quite familiar with the economic harm that occurred. I assume that a similar harm could occur with our swine industry, either with African swine fever or PRSS, I forget the acronym there. Can you comment, what would be the impact to our trade relationships? I know chicken isn't traded to that same extent, but even within our domestic industry with an outbreak of avian influenza.
Nick's nodding at me. Are you okay? Back in 2004, Canada suffered one of its most significant avian influenza outbreaks. And I remember Dr. Evans from then, and then from the one in 2009 as well. And that was a very significant outbreak. It wound up that our producers in British Columbia were not allowed to restock their barns. So they couldn't restock. So most of the broiler chicken, i.e. chicken raised for meat, was able to get to market, but those farmers were not allowed to restock their barns for several months afterwards, until we were sure that the virus was under control. And as a direct result, approximately 4% of the Canadian market was not served by chicken. Fortunately, under the supply management system, we were able to augment production in the rest of the country and ship it west. But that wouldn't always necessarily be the case. So for us, the impact domestically is quite significant because, as you said, as you indicated earlier, we don't export as much as we produce for the domestic market. And we have to be very cautious with respect to animal disease. So I would say avian influenza would probably be the most notable example in recent years of a disease that could possibly have far-reaching implications for the industry.
Thank you. I'm going to move now to the topic that's already come up in several lines of questioning because it is so important for us as committee members to understand. We have heard testimony from Dr. Kamal, that really there's negligible risk of transmission of pathogens or transmission of disease with incidental contact, or there would need to be prolonged contact between humans and animals for that to occur on farm. We've heard contradictory testimony from Pierre Vaillancourt, Dr. Pierre, a professor of veterinary medicine at the University of Montreal. And what we're hearing today, that there's multiple pathogens. So I'm going to ask our veterinarians to weigh in on this issue. I'll start with you, Dr. Weiss, and then CMVA or CVAMA. If you have contradictory positions, I'd like to hear from both of you, because this is important for us to understand as a committee. There are such huge implications to the potential of this risk, and it's something I think we need to understand. Scott, please.
Yeah, and there's no absolute with infectious diseases. It's the big issue. We can't say zero. I could say the risk, apart from mink and COVID, the risk is probably very low. We're not going to see avian influenza introduced by someone walking onto a farm. There are potential risks. The infectious disease risk actually is much greater to the person that goes on the farm, picking up something on the farm. There are risks. There are always going to be risks when people come in. They're going to be higher if someone's going farm to farm. There will be higher depending on the types of contact. You don't need prolonged contact. You need the right bacterium, virus, parasite for transmission. But the odds of a person bringing that in are really low. So we're certainly not going to say it's zero. I'm going to say it's quite low, and there are other more important reasons for preventing trespass than biosecurity, even though I think biosecurity still is an important issue.
Thank you. And we do know that it was farm-to-farm movement of activists that did occur from an Abbotsford hog farm to an Alberta turkey farm. And so that is something we have already experienced. Dr. Evans, Dr. Thielen, would you like to weigh in, please?
I would, thank you very much for the question. I would echo to a large degree what Scott has said. I think we talked earlier about lessons learned, and one lesson everyone should learn when you're talking about infectious diseases: you never say never, you never say always. That's the reality of the species interaction with various pathogens. I do believe that what we're talking about from a biosecurity and animal disease perspective is what we refer to as low probability, high consequence event. As I say, we have had the experience in Canada of foot and mouth in Saskatchewan, where, again, whether it was infected clothing or boots that introduced the foot and mouth virus in material adhering to the clothing, or whether, as also been reported, it was a sausage that was infected that got dropped into a feed trough and consumed by pigs. Either way, again, the individual was on the farm for reasonable periods of time working with those animals. The example I gave of influenza in 2009 and the 22 countries that had it in swine populations and the 5 countries that ended up with it in turkey populations.
Thank you. And mink, I think, would be the same thing. Mink and COVID would be along the same line. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rep, and thank you, Dr. Evans. And we'll move on to Mr. Blois for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses, and I'll start with Mr. DeGraff because he's the hometown fella on the committee in the Annapolis Valley. Nick, let me thank you for your leadership here locally through Chicken Farmers of Canada. And you talked about, of course, some of the work that's already ongoing. Can I ask the question? I know we have a good relationship. Maybe we're fortunate that there hasn't been some of these events in our neck of the woods, but has there been a high incidence of these types of sit-ins that you kind of alluded to, or have we largely escaped that in this area right now?
So if you're talking specifically about Nova Scotia, I would say we've probably sidestepped that. And that's why this interests me so much, because at the end of the day, if it's across the country, there's no easy spot to go to, so to speak. And that's what my concern is for sure.
And I know it might not, we're fortunate in the sense that there hasn't been a whole lot of incidents of this, but when you speak to your other producers across the country, do they explain what they do? So I can only imagine, I'm a farmer, I look out my window and there's a large group of people that may be going into my barn unwillingly knowing about the impact of what this could do to your livelihood. What did they explain what they normally would do? Do they call the police? Any experience that you might have offhand from your fellow members?
Yeah, just from conversations. I mean, the first thing is there's plenty of signs about biosecurity on a chicken farm. I mean, they're there, they're loud, they're right in front of you at the driveway. And first is, what's happening here? Why are these people ignoring the signs? Most people obey signs, right? And then from what I understand, it's call the police, and then the police don't know what to do, really. So, I think that's probably the answer to your question right there.
Okay, so because I mean, just for your benefit, Nick, I mean, we've been hearing different testimony. Part of the challenge, of course, is understanding, although this is laudable to try to avoid the incidence of being able to spread some type of biosecurity risk because of the activity of individuals that might be trespassing on farm. The question, as Mr. Evans has talked about, is the compliance, is how we enforce it, and what tools might already exist. And we've heard from other members that perhaps police may or may not have the tools that are available to them. Can I ask CFIA, because this has been a key piece of the testimony as well, about their ability to enforce this? I know CFIA, for example, they would go to Victor Olten's farm because there's a processing element. How often does CFIA show up at your particular farm, or would it be more like at Eden Valley at some of the processing side?
Yeah, so CFIA on my farm as a chicken producer, I don't think they've ever been here in person.
Okay.
But I do also have an on-farm feed mill, and they do come audit that. So they are on farm for that, for a different reason. But yeah, mostly they are at the processing facility. Yeah, not hands-on here.
Okay. Yep. No, I appreciate that. And one of the things I think probably could be a recommendation that this committee forms in the days ahead is how we can educate people about some of the biosecurity risks. I do want to go to some other witnesses, but again, I'll go on record. Thank you, Nick, for your leadership locally. Mr. Evans, you talked about compliance, and we just heard from Mr. DeGraff that CFIA is more at the processing level. You spoke on this a little earlier, but can you just, I've got 35 seconds here that I wanted to allocate to you. Can you talk about some of the challenges you see in terms of having that handled through that agency?
Well, thank you, honorable member. Quite quickly, I would say that it would be a challenge for CFIA at two levels. One, as I say, the type of training that you're looking for in investigating a potential situation related to a trespass is an entirely different set of skills than what is normally applied in either a food safety investigation or an animal health disease investigation, because of as I said before, the difference between a deliberate threat versus something that's accidental or incidental. The other component, I think, challenge for CFIA has been mentioned. CFIA is not on farms every day. Unfortunately, CFIA's normal situation to be on a farm situation is usually as part of an investigation. So again, coming back to what Henry and others have testified, so much of this is about private veterinarian involvement with producers at the farm level to sculpt their plans specific to the risk and hazards that are known to exist on that farm.
Mr. Evans, I have about 15, 20 seconds left. I guess I would say, if I could table this, part of the element is, of course, strict liability versus absolute liability. Where this is a strict liability offense, there has to be some level of intent, notwithstanding Mr. DeGraff's comments about some of the signage and awareness. I think that's an important element, and perhaps you can speak on that if someone else asks the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you, Mr. Boyce, and thank you, Dr. Evans. And we'll move to Monsieur Perron pour 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Perron, 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Madame Bishop Spencer, I think you mentioned earlier there was an increase in trespasses on farms. I'd like you to confirm that, please. And can you tell me why present laws are not able to contain this phenomenon?
Yes, there has been an increase in on-farm protests, and I think it's new. I think it's something that's kind of a new phenomenon with respect to protesting, and we believe wholeheartedly that people have the right to protest and to peacefully demonstrate in a public space. But once these actions start to breach private property, or these kinds of protests and demonstrations need to be illegal and punishable because they threaten the health and safety of our farm animals, our producers, and other stakeholders. I think that what the answer to your question is yes, there are more protests. And I think the reason that we haven't been we're not prepared for them is that it's kind of a new phenomenon. It's something that we haven't seen within the sector or within our industry, until the last few years, and that's when we're just trying to figure out the tools that we need in order to be able to deal with it. And this is one of them that we believe will allow people to ensure that our farms are protected.
D'accord. Et
Okay. And the bill would be another tool for you for inspection. Could you say a few words about the impact on producers themselves, those who are victims of a trespass? How do they act after there was a trespass incident?
And the impact that you've heard from our farmers on that? Or did you want me to do? Me? Okay, sorry. So we have had experiences where farms have been trespassed upon. It's a very emotional experience. Imagine waking up. You're a farmer and you have your daily life. Imagine waking up and finding 30 protesters in your barn. The first question becomes, what is the biosecurity? How are these? What are we going to be doing about the health of my birds? What do I do, and how do I handle it? It becomes a very stressful event for the farmer, and the farmer then doesn't know what to do. So usually the first step there is to try to call the local law enforcement and to see what they can do.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Bishop. Sorry, we're out of time. And we'll go to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd just like to thank all of our witnesses for helping contribute to our study of this bill. Maybe I'll turn my question to the chicken farmers of Canada. When you look at federal statutes such as the Criminal Code or even the Health of Animals Act, they always come into play after the fact. They are a reactive law. Someone has to have committed an offense, they have to have been found guilty, and then the appropriate punishment is applied. While I agree very much, like, people have to be held accountable for their actions, and there has to be a level of punishment that is appropriate to the crime. But I guess what I'm interested in is do you have any ideas on how we can be proactive? Are there things that the federal government can be doing to help bridge the divide that exists between a certain section of the Canadian public and our hardworking agricultural community, so that there's a more proactive attempt to educate how farms operate, how important biosecurity is, the very strong standards of care that are in place, because farmers depend on healthy livestock in order to have good incomes in the end. Any ideas you can contribute on that?
I have one. I think that what Nick talked about at the very beginning of the presentation was the concept of having FTP recognition of our animal care programs. Many, if not most, of the animal care sectors throughout Canada have, very vigorous and in many cases mandatory on-farm food safety programs that do have an FPT protocol to back those up. If we could have something similar for our mandatory animal care programs, that would give us a lot of leverage and a lot of powerful messaging in order to be able to, to tell consumers that the story of animal care in Canada is not the nightmare that they think it is, and that in fact we have an excellent system in Canada that is not only mandatory, but it's enforceable, and it's something that has teeth. And that FPT recognition would allow us a great deal to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. I think I'll end there, Chair, just in the dying seconds of my time. Thank you. I believe you're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you're right. When I'm on, I should be off. And anyway, here I am. Thanks. This will end our first panel, and really like to thank Mr. Scott Weiss from the University of Guelph, Mr. Dr. Henry Seelan, veterinarian, Dr. Brian Evans, and also Nick DeGraff, first Vice Chair of Farmers Chicken of Canada, and Lisa Bishop Spencer. Thank you all for this very interesting and your insight on the bill that we're studying now. And we'll suspend to bring in the new panel for a few minutes, and we'll be right back. Thank you all.
Thanks for.
And welcome to our new panel. Avec nous pour le deuxième.
With us for the second panel, we have Mr. Georges Correa from the Canadian Meat Council, Vice President, Market Access and Technical Affairs. Welcome. And we have Mr. Darren Ference from the Turkey Farmers of Canada. He is accompanied by Mr. Phil Boyd. And from the Union des Producteurs Agricoles, we have Mr. Marcel Groslo, General President, with his Assistant Coordinator, Ms. Tessier. It's a pleasure to see you both back today. You each have 5 minutes for your opening statements, and we will begin with Mr. Correa of the Canadian Meat Council. Please go ahead.
The Canadian Meat Council, or CMC, would like to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the private members' bill C-205, introduced by Member of Parliament John Barlow, that would address the issues of safeguarding the biosecurity of Canadian farms and the safety of the food supply. For over a century, the CMC has represented Canada's federally licensed meat packers, meat processors, and goods and services suppliers for the meat industry. The Canadian red meat industry represents over $20 billion to the Canadian economy and supports 280,000 jobs across Canada. We agree with the premise of this bill that protecting Canada's food supply is critical. Viruses like African swine fever, classic swine fever, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, foot and mouth disease, or avian influenza pose a real threat to Canadian agriculture. These biosecurity threats can decimate herds and flocks and devastate our industries and economy. Strengthening biosecurity measures for trespassers is something farmers, ranchers, food processors, and farm groups all support. The safety of food is vital to all consumers and food businesses. For the meat industry, food safety is a priority, and we want consumers to be confident that the meat they buy and eat is what they expect and that it will cause them no harm. Food safety starts at the farm and continues through the whole harvesting process, so manufacturing companies may ensure that the meat has no compromised food safety. Providing any unsuitable food liquids to livestock at any stage of the harvesting process may result in an intentional contamination of food product that may cause harm to the consumers or to the private company. There have also been a series of provincial legislation that addresses the safety risk of people interfering with livestock in transport by prohibiting, stopping, obstructing, or interfering with the motor vehicle transporting farm animals, and some provinces have in place or are in progress to adopt Trespass or Protecting Food Safety Act to protect food supply, farmers, agri-food business, and farm animals from the risk of trespass activities. The Canadian meat industry is the most intensely regulated and inspected industry in the world, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, inspectors are present during every minute of operations to ensure compliance of the livestock handling from unloading and through the harvesting process to make sure that the food safety regulations are followed. The meat industry is exceeding animal welfare and food safety regulations, as those are essential for the sustainability of our industry. If CFIA identifies humane handling or food safety problems, it may result in the issuance of corrective actions required, or if any significant problems are flagged, they can pursue with planned operation suspension, subject to administrative monetary penalties. Meat plans not only work for the meat federal regulations, but also support on-farm codes of practice under the National Farm Animal Care Council, and its employees are trained and certified under Canadian Livestock Transport Certification Programs or other U.S. similar certification programs. The supply chain from farm to slaughter has guidelines and certifications to maintain high animal welfare standards and the necessary biosecurity and food safety practices to protect those food animals from disease or contaminants under the on-farm food safety programs. Animal agriculture production is the basis of our industry, and the biosecurity of these farms and ranches must be protected. Protesters interfering in the operations of farms, transporters, or food processing business can lead to serious and unintended consequences that endanger the animals they seek to protect. It's important to ensure the animals that enter in our supply chain are healthy and not exposed to outside factors. This ensures that our members can continue to safeguard the meat we produce and continue to provide the world and the Canadians with the safe, nutritious meat they expect from our industry. In brief, the Canadian Meat Council and its members are in support of the Bill C-205 and the proposed amendments that would provide increased security to allow our members to operate without the danger of outside interference by well-meaning protesters or activists. Such interference is a danger to the food animals, the professional workers in the supply chain, the food products, and potentially to the protesters themselves. I will be finished with that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. And now we'll go to Éleveur de Dindon. Whoever wants to take the floor for 5 minutes, go ahead.
The turkey farmers, is there somebody who would like to speak? Is it Mr. Ference or Mr. Boyd?
Mr. Ference will speak.
Go ahead, Mr. Ference.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, thank you. On behalf of the Turkey Farmers of Canada, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to appear before you today, the House of Commons Standing Committee, and regarding Bill C-205. I'm Darren Ference, and I own and operate a turkey and chicken operation in Alberta. I also raise cattle and crop about 3,500 acres of crops. So I've represented Alberta at the Turkey Farmers of Canada since 2013 and was elected chair in 2018. I'm joined here with Phil Boyd today. He's the executive director of the Turkey Farmers of Canada. Today, TFC would like to show our support for Bill Bill C-205, introduced by MP John Barlow. We feel the bill will help prevent unlawful entry to farms and breaching of biosecurity protocols, and in doing so protects Canadian farmers against the negative ramifications of activism on the farm. This is an issue that has become increasingly prevalent of concern for many turkey farmers and the whole agriculture industry. About 1.5 years ago, a turkey farmer in Alberta entered his barn to find over 30 individuals from an activist organization had broken in. Additionally, the activists had made sure that the RCMP and press were called and were on site. This was a huge shock to the farmer. Imagine if you woke up in the morning to find a group of strangers sitting at your kitchen table, or showed up to work and had them sitting all around your office on the floor. Despite being on private property and breaching biosecurity protocols, the group demanded turkeys to be released to them before they would leave. The turkey farmer handled the situation well, being open and honest, and pointed out to the on-farm programs in place for the welfare of birds. However, the situation was difficult for both the farmer and the turkeys in his care, and points to the absolute importance of this bill. Break-ins not only breach the farm biosecurity, they negatively impact the farmers and their farm families, and have ramifications on their feeling of safety and well-being. Canadian turkey farmers take a great care to ensure the humane treatment of our turkeys, while providing safe, high-quality food to consumers. As mentioned, the Canadian turkey industry has 2 mandatory on-farm programs that ensure Canadian turkey is raised with rigorous standards of food safety and animal welfare. Both these programs are reviewed annually and audited by qualified on-farm auditors. The TFC on-farm food safety program focuses on controlling pathogens on farm, minimizing disease transmission to turkey flocks, and ensures that turkeys marketed are free of medication and other chemical residues. This program received full government recognition under the CFIA Food Safety Recognition Program, showing national consistency in terms of food safety. recognized as following the NFACC Animal Care Assessment Framework. The process involves a diverse range of stakeholders, which among many others includes researchers, veterinarians, and animal welfare group representation. This program verifies Canadian turkey farmers' commitment to ensuring the proper care and respectful treatment of our birds, and that the programs are reviewed by a third-party process, including third-party audits. The finding of the third-party auditors has consistently been that the National Flock Care Program was implemented effectively and maintained on an ongoing basis, and that the animal care measures are consistently applied. These on-farm programs lay out strict biosecurity procedures applicable to farm personnel and visitors to prevent the spread of disease in barns and the meat and animal welfare and food safety standards. This includes signage on the farm, locking barns, foot and clothing biosecurity, in addition to tracking visitors. Those trespassing on farm are putting these protocols at risk, potentially exposing the turkeys to unknown pathogens and increased stress. Farmers take great care to maintain the atmosphere in the barns, keep birds safe, barns clean, and mitigate stressors. When individuals enter the farm property without authorization, they are directly risking the health and the welfare of these birds in the barn. In conclusion, I would like to once again express my appreciation of the invitation to appear before the Agri Committee, and I must reiterate the importance of the bill for our industry. And I would ask members of the Agriculture Committee to carefully consider it. We recognize some provinces are undertaking work in this regard. However, national consistency is very important to ensure all farmers across Canada receive the same protection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ference. So we'll go to l'Union des producteurs.
We'll move on now to the UPA. Mr. Groslo or Ms. Tessier, 5 minutes. Members of the committee, Mr. Chair, we are very happy to have been invited to be able to speak to you today. Rather than going over the aspect of food health and biosecurity, because that has really been discussed at length, and there has been very eloquent testimony before the committee that has been delivered on these two matters. I would like to speak to something else. 2 years ago, there was a trespass at the Ferme Paquet, and the consequences of the trespass were significant. First of all, the people arrived at a production site where there was no residence that was nearby. The house wasn't nearby, and so they were able to access it quite easily very early in the morning hours. The site was locked, of course, but they were able to break in, and once inside, they succeeded in opening all the other doors. It was winter, and so it was cold, and they let the temperature of the building housing the animals drop. They put water in the gas tank of the generator, and naturally, of course, nobody had seen that before the fuel tests were actually carried out. So the consequences of this break-in were great. They published photos of the break-in. The Gregoire family received threats subsequent to the break-in, and they were psychologically affected further to that because people everywhere in the world were threatening them, sending threats. They were being denigrated. There was a high rate of mortality in the flock because of that intrusion. There were abortions of some of and some animals had to be destroyed after that in the herd. and some people wanted to end their policies with them, and in fact, the insurance company didn't want to renew the insurance coverage, and there had to be an intervention to be able to provide insurance for this farm. There was significant damage done on the long term. So to obtain redress, they had to go into court. They had to demonstrate that their difficulties were caused because of the trespass, and it was difficult to do. This is why this bill, C-205, is so very important. It's important that it be passed because of the consequences that were triggered by these militants. And what that meant for the farm. The young woman at the press conference was crying some weeks after the event itself. So for farm producers who have to live through a situation like that, it is extremely difficult. There are very few consequences for people who are the trespassers because you have to be able to prove that there was damage. They might be given a warning by the police. They might get their fingers tapped. But if there is no vandalism, or if you cannot prove that there was an offense in Quebec, little else can be done. In the eastern townships, now I'm talking about a dairy farm, there were two trespassers, and they tried to send the cows outside. That firm was near the highway, and so you can just imagine. So they were able to break through the fence. So what happens if one of your animals is hit by a car on the highway, or if one of the occupants of the car is wounded, is hurt, or even killed because the car hit a cow? So we have to absolutely discourage any type of trespass. The bill that you are discussing is an important one. The fines have to be significant. So all this issue of biosecurity is certainly valid, but you also have to see the human side of it, the human side of the trespass. It is the humans that will be affected as well. So in conclusion, I think that Section 9.1 should be made more clear. It should be simplified. I'm sorry, sir, your time is up. Well, perhaps I can come back to that in the questioning. Yes, absolutely. We'll begin the question period.
So the bill, Mr. Barlow, for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Barlow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for everybody's testimony. And I think from the stories we're hearing from Mr. Ference and Mr. Grillo, you understand why this legislation is so important for not only biosecurity, but the mental health of our farmers as well. And maybe to Mr. Ference, to start with you, Mr. Shetter is a constituent, and I know how this impacted him and his family. But you mentioned something that I thought was really quite interesting, and we heard this from the chicken farmers in the previous panel as well, is we're seeing these incidents of activism increase. But these activists that it happened in Saint-Hézanne, Quebec as well, but they were the ones who actually phoned the RCMP because they knew the consequences would be minimal, if anything. So to me, it shows that the current system we have right now is not suitable. There isn't enough of a deterrent. Do you see the fines and the penalties within Bill C-205 as a strong enough deterrent to maybe send a message to those activist groups and those people who are doing these actions, unlawfully protesting on private property, that this will be a deterrent?
It's definitely an improvement on what we have, because what we have, there is no deterrent for them. So this will give some consequences, and hopefully you get a deterrent on that. They're calling the police because the police, for one, they weren't trained on how to get rid of them. They don't know how to deal with the biosecurity, and there's no consequences for it. So.
And Mr. Ference, and maybe Mr. Grillo, you want to chime in on this really quickly as well. But we're talking about the biosecurity here, which is an important element as well. But how important is this about showing national leadership in standing up for the safety of our farm families as well as their mental health? How important is that as part of this legislation as well?
For us, it's essential. what we appreciate is just what Mr. Ference has said, that this would be applied throughout Canada. And there are some provinces that have not yet adopted any type of legislation, but we would like to have at least minimal protection. I think that one of the elements that should be added, though, is that the number of fines be applied for each individual who trespasses, rather than just a single fine for the group per se. If you have 25 people who go into an area where the pigs are housed, it can have an effect, and the same for a dairy farm. So I think that you should add fines, penalties, according to the number of people who participate in the trespass.
Well, thanks, Mr. Grillo, for that. And that is included in the legislation. There is two different sets of fines. There is one for the individuals who are protesting, but that stronger one is for that organization or that group, like, whether it's PETA or Extinction Revolution or those types of groups. There is a stronger fine for them as well. So those two different tiers do exist in the legislation, but I appreciate you addressing that as well. I wanted to turn to Mr. Correa, and I think talking about the processing side of this is also important. We've seen what's happened with the cyber attack on JBS recently. Certainly the shutdowns within the processing and the supply chain with COVID, when Cargill here in my riding was shut down for 14 days, it was a backlog of 130,000 animals. I just want to ask you two quick questions and do your best to answer them. But would a processing facility, if someone, we've seen blockades or people feeding animals when they're in transport, would a processing facility turn away an entire load if they aren't sure what's been tampered with on that load? And what are the security or safety concerns about protesters around the machinery and the trucks, certainly impacting the processing plants as well?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Just to respond to the first question, any contaminant that can be provided to those food animals that is unknown, the CFI inspector will be in the capacity to refuse the entry of those animals in our slaughterhouses. So it's under regulations. For example, we could have chemicals that can be taken by those animals, or even antibiotics or something that we suspect that those animals are going to be or had a contaminant. They can refuse the entry to the slaughterhouse perfectly.
Right. So if it looks like someone's trying to water pigs, for example, you don't know what they are giving them. So that entire truckload of animals could be refused, costing the producer, significantly by having that load turned away. The second question, Mr. Correa, then would be, what are some of the concerns that the processors would have in terms of having the public unlawfully enter onto the facility grounds, or operating or protesting around, these trucks, heavy machinery? Certainly, I've been inside Cargill. I know what that looks like and the biosecurity concerns that are there. But what are some of the security concerns that the processors would have on that element?
Yeah, all the people around animals and around vehicles or equipment are professionals on that. So all are fully trained on to manipulate or handling animals or equipment. So these equipments or vehicles are extremely dangerous for people, and it's dangerous also for animals if they're not manipulated well. So
thank you, Mr. Correa. Sorry, we're out of time. So Mr. Ellis for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Ellis.
Yeah, and I guess my first question would be to Marcel, and he spoke about the court case that happened 2 years ago and the trespass, and he kind of touched on the court case, but he didn't go into any details of what the outcome of the court case was. And if he knew that, I would just like to know if any of the charges did stick and what charges did.
There was, the farm decided not to prosecute. before the courts because it didn't want to continue to be in social media, receiving social media threats from unknown people. I call these groups, terrorist groups, and most of those groups frighten their victims. They frighten the people who are their victims. It's very difficult for them, that is to say the victims, to prove the damage that they underwent, and they didn't want to add to the loss that they had already experienced. But they've asked for an injunction for people who carry out trespass of that nature to prevent them from further trespass. They've obtained a provisional injunction, a conditional one, and it is going to possibly become permanent, and they won't be able to go within 250 meters of a farm or go nearby. But that injunction is only applying to those trespassers who are at the Barclay farm. I have to say it's almost impossible to deal with the damage.
Other cases then there have been charges successfully laid?
No.
No, not me, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Darren, you touched on a few things, but I just want you to walk me through what type of protocol you have now for farm protests or unlawful entry. Is there a standard protocol at the Turkey Farmers of Canada have?
We went over the protocol, and I know BC and Alberta all went over the protocol with all their farmers to go push it on how to deal with it. And TFC was working with all of our provincial boards to make sure that we had a protocol that was across the country that was consistent on how to handle it. So,
okay, and right now, would current trespassing laws apply for any of the trespassings that happen now? And I guess the other question is, what recourses now if someone intentionally makes a farm animal sick? Are there any recourses now that you guys have in your toolbox? And that was to you again, Darren, sorry.
Yeah, I don't believe that any of the current trespassing laws in the national, I know Alberta has brought in a new trespassing law that very much mirrors or is very similar to this bill, but this bill protects us right across the country and doesn't expose certain farmers and protect other farmers. So I think it's important to have the national one that covers that the BC or the Bill C-205 will do.
And just touch on that, and I think Ontario also has an act in place also. I just wondered, do you know if there's been any charges on those acts? I know the Ontario Act was 2020, and I'm not sure when the BC Act went into place, and I believe Alberta has one also. Do you know if they've been successful, those acts?
I don't know if there's any charges on the acts. I know that there was a charge from the trespass that went prior to the act, and that's what drove the act in Alberta, but I don't know the progress of where that is.
Okay, and just one last question, and I'll give this one to you, Darren. Don't feel that I'm picking on you here, but this question was asked already of Marcel, and Mr. Barlow's explained in his testimony to the committee on May 6th that 2021 that protecting mental health of farmers was a key motivation to introducing Bill 206. And I just wanted you to touch on, if enacted, would this bill improve the mental health of farmers? If so, and how? If you could just touch on that.
This act would improve the mental health of farmers. The stress that a farmer has, having all these people come in, and it's like invading your home or your place of business. Your home is your private place. Our farms are our private place, no different than your home. And if you have 30 people sitting there demanding certain pieces out of there, it is very stressful, and it's very stressful to deal with. And our animals are part. They're actually like part of us. So when the animals become stressed, we're also stressed, and this would help improve it. Mental health.
Thank you for your testimony, Chair. Over to you.
Vous êtes en sourdine, Monsieur le Président. Yeah, you're on mute, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Perron.
Thank you. 6 minutes, Mr. Perron. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I'm particularly happy to see Mr. Ference and Mr. Groslo. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Listen, Mr. Groslo, I've asked a variety of questions of different witnesses, and I'm very happy to hear you speak about the subject that you discussed in your introduction, the injunction that you referenced, which has now become permanent. It was very difficult to obtain. And what could have been done if they hadn't obtained it? Well, there would have been penalties, significant ones, that would have been applied if they hadn't obtained it. If they didn't respect the injunction, they would be ignoring a court order, and that in itself would lead to high fines. So these are laws that apply when an injunction is in place to prevent an individual or individuals from acting in a certain way. It can go up to imprisonment. And the UPA is a big organization. So is it realistic to think that you could protect your members in that way? No. As I mentioned, Mr. Perron, the Paquette farm, you know, the UPA has a defense fund, a professional defense fund, to support action that has to be taken to overcome bias. Well, no, maybe not bias, but a jurisprudence that is supposed to protect all producers. But the farm, Paquette, didn't want to continue its case. They wanted to really, in a sense, to lick their wounds and absorb the cost because of social media. Okay. Can you tell us about the processes that are in place? I'd like to shed light on it. There are some people who say, okay, well, if they're concerned about a certain farm, they can denounce it. Can you talk about whistleblowing? Yes, there are processes in place. In cases of mistreatment of animals in Quebec is primarily amongst people who are not farmers, not producers. They are people who have puppy mills, who raise dogs, and it's more in that instance where there is mistreatment. In Quebec, it's MAPAC that is responsible for dealing with mistreatment, cruelty towards animals. They have to absorb the costs directly. Because we give good treatment to our animals. This is a very important point for people to understand. We treat our animals well. And those people who will speak out against consuming meat, well, there are laws that govern the production of meat in farm animals. There are veterinarians who inspect and who would be able to be aware of any type of mistreatment of animals. And certainly then that would be signaled very clearly. It would be denounced, so there would be action taken in that case. Well, what about just having a suspicion? Can you contact MAPAC? Yes, you can, and they send out an inspector. In your statement, you touched on something that I would like to dig deeper in. It was indicated that there would be an event that could perhaps go bad. Say somebody who wakes up one morning and finds 30 or so people on their property or in their barn, and then that takes a turn for the worse. What would happen? What do you do? We send a note. We have sent notes. We have sent messages to all our producers saying, avoid trying to settle the issue yourselves. Call the police. Take pictures. Take photographs. We've given them a procedure to follow. But of course, Mr. Perron, we can't control the reaction that each farm producer might have given that situation. Mr. Leroux, who is a producer as well, you know reactions, and I'm certain that there are some farmers that might say, get out of my property and do it quick. But people, temperaments are different and tempers may rise. But we are aware of that. And I honestly believe that that is what these trespassers want. Because if they can take advantage of a situation like that to decry the violence on the part of a farmer, they would do so. Thank you, Mr. Ference. You made reference to an event where there were 30 people on a farm, but Mr. Groslo said that he described what producers have done. Can you tell me how the situation you described ended quickly?
The farmer arrived at the barn to opened the door to find 30 people lined up down the wall. And those people had already called the RCMP. The RCMP came. They didn't really know what the biosecurity was. RCMP ended up, they were outside. The people were demanding the release of a turkey. Our protocol is to never release it. I do believe in that time we hadn't gone over it with the farmer, and I do believe he did release a bird to their care, which then could not be put back in.
Thank you, Mr. Ference. Now, Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I think we can broadly define, trespassing as the unlawful entry onto private land. And I think the reason why it's mostly contained within provincial legislation is because under our constitution, the provinces do have exclusive jurisdiction in making laws in relation to property and civil rights. And the criminal law is engaged when we have an identifiable harm against public health, which is why the CFIA exists as a federal agency. But Mr. Ference, I guess maybe I want to ask you, because you did make some comments about how provincial laws against trespass are not really working. Like, can you maybe just broaden on that? Like, you said that police have had a hard time following through with charges. Can you just illuminate that a little bit more so we can understand that?
So when we're talking about the trespass that occurred here,
okay,
the trespassing bill was not brought into Alberta. It was brought in after this due to this circumstance. Trespassing, then you could have the no trespass sign, but they can come in from any point, or else it had to be the farmer that was trespassed against actually had to press the charges and be convinced to press the charges. There was no distinctive law for just automatically charging them without the farmer pressing charges. So I think it's important to have these laws in place where it's set out, and if you violate them, then you have to go. So the one in Alberta now, it has a lot stronger penalties toward the organization that organizes it, and it's very similar to the Bill C-205. And I think it's important that we get consistency across the country so that I was listening earlier to some of the chicken farmers. You don't want them to go to where it's an easier spot to target farms.
You had made a comment earlier just about police and their training on biosecurity issues. Like, what do you think police agencies' current understanding is of biosecurity?
When we went through it as part of the Alberta board and monitoring went there, very little understanding from the police on what biosecurity was. They entered the barn without any biosecurity protocols. They did not put on any biosecurity clothing or wash, clean their footwear or anything else when they were going in, which is standard amongst all feed industry or anything that's anybody that's associated with that barn or with that operation would do. So they had no understanding of that, and they just entered to ask or remove the trespassers at that time. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done there.
I guess the reason why I'm asking the question is because, I think police have a very good understanding of what trespass is, the unlawful presence on private property and not leaving when the owner says to leave. But, if the CFIA, they have said, they are an organization which intimately understands the concept of biosecurity. But they have already testified before this committee that if C205 were to come into effect, they just simply don't have the resources to take on the added responsibility. So how do we fix that where if C205 does become a part of the Health of Animals Act, how do we fix the situation where, police, if they are deciding to apply charges, would they need to have CFIA officials with them to give them that understanding of biosecurity? I'm just wondering if you have a solution on how we fix the resource problem in implementing the law and enforcing it.
I think it could be some simple training on some simple biosecurity practices if you're working in those rural or agricultural areas that would be part of the RCMP training.
Okay, good to know. One thing we've received some, and maybe I'll open it up to other witnesses if they want to chime in. We did receive a brief from Humane Canada, which of course is all of the different humane societies in each province. It's the national network. They've made some recommendations that they would like to see the federal government provide stronger support for the National Farm Animal Care Council's work to create standards of care. And increased financial support. Do you think that would go away to being proactive and maybe educating, providing that much needed education to the Canadian public about, how farm animals are actually looked after?
Is that to me?
Yeah, maybe you can start, and if any of our other witnesses want to chime in.
Phil, do you want to go? You got your hand up.
Thanks very much, Darren. Thanks, Mr. McGregor, for the question. It's an important question. But by way of context, we have to remember that the people that will break and enter into a barn are animal activists. They're not like the general population that does care about animal welfare. And so I'm not sure that what Humane Canada is proposing would address or go any way towards mitigating the kind of activist activity we've seen. Thank you.
I see Mr. Grollo. You want to
Mr. McGregor.
I'd add Mr. McGregor, if you allow me to do so. Yes. The vast majority of farmers in Canada have adopted good exemplary practices with their various councils to protect animals and to follow veterinary advice. So you have quality rules in Canada, and it applies for the dairy producers and for the hog industry. So all that work is to a large part done. Thank you, Mr. Grollo. And now, second round, we'll begin with 5 minutes. Questions, Monsieur Leroux, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us this afternoon. My question at the outset is for Mr. Grollo. You stressed that this whole problem of intrusions, of trespass, creates difficulties for the families themselves. You spoke about the Gregoire family and about the dairy farm in the eastern townships. There were consequences. I'm just wondering if you could just expand on that. Well, in the eastern townships, there were only 2 trespassers, so it was difficult and there were only 2 animals that were sent outside of the farm, outside of the stable, so that the activity was limited. Yes, but you spoke about a young couple of farmers that they had been farming for about a year, and further to that trespass, they stopped farming. And that affected the farm succession. Yes, We have to protect farm families. We have to have protocols. We have to have protection for the health of animals as well. But this is a new level where the federal government could intervene. And by so doing, and by guaranteeing the health of the troops, rather the flocks and the herds, you will be able to improve the health of farm families. As for stress, I would say as a producer now, everybody is under stress. We keep wondering, is that going to happen to me one day? Is it going to happen to my farm? Nobody can predict when or how it will happen to me or to someone else, and it's stressful. Are there experiences that have been had by other Quebec farmers or dairy farmers? Your members, for the most part, are dairy producers, and they're very sensitive to this. What would they say about a bill like C-205? Well, yes, you know that there are hog producers. You've heard from them in your committee and other groups as well, because we all consider that the biosecurity, the health of animals is very important to discourage that type of behavior. We're not opposing demonstrations. Demonstrations are important. You have to protect the right to demonstrate. But they cannot trespass on the rights and damage property rights. Well, do you think that C-205 and the fines that are being proposed in it would be an adequate deterrent? Do you think that they are being set at the right level? Because you have to understand from what you've said about Mr. Gregoire's experience on his farm, that had some very significant impacts. I would say that if the individuals are targeted and potentially charged with heavy fines, I think they might think twice before doing it again. And the associations for which they are trying to prove a point would not necessarily want to find themselves in financial difficulty. So I think this would be a good deterrent, this bill. And in your notes, you ended with a question. You spoke to section 9.1. What do you think it should read like? Well, we would say that it would be prohibited without authorization to enter a building or an enclosure in which animals are kept. But we would avoid exposing the animals to a disease or toxic substance that could contaminate them. And we would take out certain parts. Well, in our brief, we described what we are suggesting. We feel that by limiting it, it makes the interpretation of this section clearer because it's an essential part of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Groslo. Thank you, Mr. Lowe. And Madame Doucette, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Groslo, there was a report in Matac. It was covered by Radio-Canada, where there were groups of activists that got onto a farm. And MAPAC has sent a direct response to this event. In view of your view and your comments on MAPAC earlier, could you comment further? Yes, further to that trespass, there was a complaint that was filed. There was an inspection that was done by MAPAC, and the MAPAC asked the Polcret farm to make some changes, and the farm did so. But it proves at the same time that complaints to MAPAC are sufficient but there was mortality, there was sickness, and there was damage in that instance. So you don't have to go as far as that to be able to make a complaint. And had there been a complaint that was made, there would have been results by MAPAC. Thank you. I've heard about, it was called a vision of horror, according to the reporting on Radio-Canada. Can you throw some light on this? I would be more subtle about what constitutes a vision of horror, because once the cameras got there, the demonstrators had been there for a while. The animals, no matter what pig pen, when there are 25 or more animals, when they haven't been fed, the doors were opened, and therefore the animals were cold. And I think you have to see the matter in context, this reporting by Radio-Canada. And also, there was an effect on the health of the animals, on the safety of the animals. I don't think C-205 can correct everything, but it's a good step. Thank you. Often, in the case of trespass on farms, we see that the farmers or producers do not lay charges. Yes. Well, how can we encourage producers and farmers to lay charges? Well, with the C-205, for C-205, in our mind, it is something that is going to discourage demonstrators. They're going to find other ways because if they break something or if they have a negative impact on the biosafety of the animals, they will face heavy fines. So it is a deterrent. It will discourage them, just like mortality on the highways. And there were penalties that were applied for instances of driving on the highways. So we think that amending the Trespass Act for homes or for farms, presently in the criminal code in Quebec, what exists there is not stringent enough, and it should be made more stringent and be added to the tools that appear in 205. Mr. Correa and Mr. Ference, do you have anything to add? If you do, I give you the floor.
The biosecurity. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just think it's stringent that we have this Bill C-205, and for farmers, majority of farmers are passive, so they're hard to get to charge. They don't want to. They want to farm and they want to be on their farm and they want to do that. They don't want to be pulled away to go to a criminal court while they're calving or they're seeding or they're out. So it becomes a hindrance. So it's hard to do that. So this will help deter the people coming there and not necessarily mean that the farmer has to press the charges, but the law can they can be pressed there because it was broken. So
thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président, j'ai terminé.
Thank you. I finished, Chair.
Merci, Madame Bessette.
Thank you, Madame Bessette. Mr. Perron, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, Mr. Perron. Mr. Ference, I'd like to come back to the issue of resources. You talked about the police that should be trained earlier on, but the people from the CFIA tell us that we just don't have the resources to be able to assume what's in the bill. But do you think that if you have a tougher infraction, don't you think that I'd like to hear what you think about this very quickly, please.
If CFIA doesn't have the resources, I still think the RCMP has the resource. There are resources in rural Canada. They're in every community. They just need to be properly trained on how to access or enter a farm differently than they would another business. And I think they could efficiently and effectively be our resource for this bill.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Mr. Groslo? Well, I also think that there can be cooperation between the CFIA and the MATAC inspectors in Quebec. In all the provinces, the CFIA does laboratory work in all the provinces, in the territories rather, but doesn't do so in the provinces. So you think the local force would be able to be contacted if there were an infraction? Well, for not just cooperation, but there could be a transfer of responsibility, as you see in other areas between the federal government and the provincial governments, that would streamline the use of the bill and also the regulatory framework with respect to health and safety of the animals. Yes, and about your proposal in your report, the draft of your amendment, we'll look closely at that for sure. I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add or stress. First of all, I want to congratulate Mr. Barlow for having introduced this bill. This is significant, and I don't know if there will be time enough before the session ends to pass this bill, but I want to thank him, and I want to encourage him to continue this work, whether this is a bill that will be adopted in this session or in another. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perron.
For 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I'll continue with the Turkey Farmers of Canada. With the Parent Act, the Health of Animals Act, the existing prohibition sections, when they're defining the prohibitions, and they all have to deal with how you're treating a diseased animal. Like, it's illegal to bring it to market, to conceal, to let it go into a pasture. But the prohibitions in the Parent Act exist to all, like they refer to all persons, whereas I guess C205 is using the specific language to no person shall, but then it includes that without lawful authority or excuse. There have been a number of cases where employees at a farm have been responsible for introducing a biosecurity threat. Is there anything we can do to make sure that every person, no matter whether it's a protester or a farm employee, is actually respecting those biosecurity protocols? Anything further the federal government can be doing to make sure that any person who's entering a place where animals are kept is observing those strict biosecurity protocols? Any suggestions you might have?
I don't have any suggestions on how you can support it. Phil does here. I know we have our animal flock care and our on farm, and everybody is, and we're third party audited, and so we're doing all we can do to that. Phil, do you have more to add?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Darren. Again, Mr. McGregor, a couple of points, if I could, really quickly. One, our programs, I'm probably similar to the other programs you've heard discussed at this committee, all have a training component for the farmer and for farm employees. And they're mandatory programs, and so that training has to happen. And so it's a continuous improvement as far as farm labor is concerned, at least within our sector, talking to any of the farmers that have hired on employees. The second thing that's interesting, we have CFI accreditation on our on-farm food safety program through an FPT process. We have asked for that on our animal care program, but haven't received it yet. And that would really reinforce the kinds of things that we're trying to address through our testimony on this bill. And TFC as well, Mr. Barlow appreciates the work that you've put into this and the leadership you've shown on it. So I don't know if that answers your question entirely, but by way of context, training and that kind of accreditation, that kind of recognition for the animal welfare component of our programs, same in other sectors, would be a meaningful step as well.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd, and thank you, Mr. McGregor. And that concludes our second hour. I really want to thank our panel, Conseil des viandes du Canada, George Correa, et des éleveurs de dindons du...
And the turkey producers.
for appearing, et aussi de l'Union des producteurs agricoles.
And from the UPA, Mr. Marcel Groslo and Annie Tessier, Joint Coordinator. I thank everyone for having appeared today. Thank you all. To everybody, we see you next week. Go Habs, go.